Hi, everyone. My name is Brad Genzer. Welcome to the Business of Sports panel, and please come in and take your seats. Today we have a great panel for you. From my right to your left, we have John Harper of Wasserman Media Group. We have Marie Donahue of ESPN. I'm going to skip the moderator in a second because I'm going to hand it over to her. We have Tom Garfinkel of the Miami Dolphins and Neil Glatt of the New York Jets. And of course, our moderator is Andrea Kramer of the NFL Network and Real Sports with Bryant Gumbel. Before we get started and I hand it off to Andrea, I have a few announcements about Q&A. We will allow for Q&A in this panel, and it's going to be done virtually through Twitter and or texting. If you're going to text, please text the code word BSPORT, that's BSPORT, to the number 2233. So that's BSport followed by your question to 2233. If you're going to tweet, please tweet at poll, P-O-L-L, and then the same combination of BSport and your question. And we'll hand it over to Andrea for about 15 minutes at the end for audience Q&A. So with that, Andrea, welcome.
Thank you, Brad. Brad's done a great job in helping us set all this up. Welcome to everybody here. I think we got a great panel. I thought it would be interesting to just start off a little bit differently, since there are students out here. What was each of your first real job? I don't mean, delivering newspapers when you're 13 years old. Your first real job out of school, what was it, and how did it affect you? What did you learn from it? We'll go this way. Let's start with Neil.
After I graduated college, I started out, I did a couple of years in investment banking before I went to the NFL. And I think the takeaway there was learn general skills, embrace the knowledge, do as much as possible to kind of understand the businesses that you're working with. And then ultimately, if where you're working at that point in time is not going to be the end all be all, apply it to something later. But I think in terms of initially putting a premium on learning skills is what I value from it.
I moved to Chicago with some friends after I graduated from college, and I had to get a job to make some money. So I got a job bartending next to Wrigley Field. Yes. I was trying to get a job in sports, and about a year later, I'd been on several interviews and no one hired me. So my dad took me to dinner one night. He said, how's the interviews going? I said, not so great. I can't get anybody to hire me. He said, well, how are things going at the bars? I said, well, it's fine. I can pay my rent. It's a fun place to work. He said, was there anything you'd do differently if you ran the place? I thought about it. I said, yeah, I'd change this, I'd do this. He said, well, those are really good ideas. Why don't you tell the manager those things? I said, well, I don't want to work in the bar business forever. I want to work in sports. He said, it doesn't matter. As long as you're learning and growing, that's all that matters. So I went back, told the manager, the owner, my ideas, and 3 years later I was running 3 bars in Chicago.
Wow.
And then that led to a job at Miller Brewing Company and led to other things. And that's always now just been a sort of core tenet of my career and also just my life, just to always be learning every day.
That's a great story. That one I like. Ms. Donahue?
Well, I went to law school in New York, and when I graduated, I worked at a Wall Street law firm. And I was there about 6 years and just did hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of deals. So, a lot of things have changed in my career. We deal with incredibly complex media issues and internet issues and things like that. But I always tell people, I haven't actually seen something in a deal term I didn't see in those first 6 years. So I feel like it was boot camp for the rest of my career.
So I did my business undergrad in Canada, and while a lot of my fellow colleagues were going to Wall Street and going into the consulting track that was pretty traditional, the time that I was coming out, the Toronto Raptors and Vancouver Grizzlies were coming into the NBA. And there was a woman from the partnerships group that was speaking at a conference, and I ended up having an opportunity to speak with her, and thankfully she offered me a free opportunity to work for them. And so I was able to do that, and I really approached it as being a sponge. And one of the main jobs that I had there is around a big lead up to the draft. They were holding the draft in Toronto, and it was all about celebrating different pieces of their business in the city. And they were doing a 3-on-3 tournament, and I was in charge of finding vendors for all of the signages. And unfortunately, the vendor didn't deliver on time, and so we were basically 24 hours going back and forth to Mississauga, which was 20 minutes outside of the city. Myself, but not only myself, my boss and my boss's boss were in cars 24 hours building signs. And I thought I have just ruined my chance to be in the sports business. But thankfully, that being the sponge mentality really brought me back to working with those folks and really understanding how to persevere through that. And that's actually what led me to Nike and now to here.
One of the things that we always hear about, say a player gets traded or re-signed or something, sports is a business. These are business decisions. We always hear that. But what are the differences between traditional business and sports business? I mean, one thing that comes to mind for me is you've got, in so many, say, franchises in the National Football League, a man who's made a tremendous fortune, had great success in a car dealership or in the oil business, and then he lives his lifelong dream and buys an NFL team, and it doesn't work. It just doesn't work, at least to start. What's the difference between business and sports business? Tom, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think the core tenets of business are sort of brand strategy, people. Those things are the same. In my experience, the things that are very different, and whether that's across auto racing or baseball or football or really all of sports business. First, the way the teams are bought and sold, the businesses are bought and sold is very different. So discounted cash flow analysis as valuation methodology is largely irrelevant. I don't know a lot of other industries where you could lose, you could have negative cash flow for 5 years and the business is worth twice as much 5 years later. That happens in sports. Secondly, I think that, and I say this as a capitalist, a degree of socialism is actually imperative. So if it were a truly capitalist environment in the NFL, there wouldn't be 32 teams, there'd be 4 or 5. So the notion of competitive parity is sort of antithetical to normal businesses, but it's very important in sports. Third, I think PR is a totally different animal. So I don't know a lot of other $200, $300 million businesses that are in the newspaper, on the radio, on TV every day being criticized. And so you really have to, that's probably the biggest one for new owners coming in that maybe they don't quite appreciate. If Target has 70 million credit card users get their cards breached, it may not even have the same national impact in the media as something happening at a sports team. And then I think too, our fans are emotionally connected to our teams already. So if you're a burger company or a cereal company or a truck and you're trying to market yourself, you spend millions of dollars trying to create an emotional connection with your fan base or with your consumers. We already have that. And then finally, I think we're really public trust. So every owner I've ever worked for, I've said, you don't own the team. And they look at me and say, what do you mean I don't own the team? I just spent millions of dollars. And I say, you are the steward of a public trust. The team was here before you got here. It'll be here after you're gone. And that's a fundamentally different way to look at a business you own than another business that you might own or that might have made you wealthy enough to buy the sports team in the first place.
Well, I worked at the league for a long time, and so you didn't really deal with the wins and losses as much at the league level. So there was always going to be a Super Bowl champion. There was always something that you could market. At the club level in particular, the wins and losses, it's just a dramatically different proposition. So when you think about putting business plans in place and you make a lot of smart decisions, you hire the right people, you have the right social media strategy, but wins and losses really do translate into, first of all, the mood of the building. There are people in the organizations that's jobs depend, their promotions, money depends on wins and losses. So that is just fundamentally different than any other business proposition that I've been involved in for. It's an externality almost to what at least the people who work on the business side are doing, and it's just something that you have some influence over, but ultimately you have to react to it. And then the media scrutiny of everything from a pricing decision to a sponsorship is what I think is a challenge certainly for business executives, but I think that's why some owners do struggle. It is that initial blast of overwhelming media attention, particularly in the major sports.
And not just media attention, but really fans have so much more of an interest in sports business.
Yeah, I mean, that's something we found at ESPN over the last few years is fans, they obviously care about certain players, certain teams, but they are so much more sophisticated about salary caps and things like that. We're in the midst of a series about Steve Nash. If you guys have seen it, it's on Grantland. We just put up the second episode today. And you know Steve Nash is a potential likely Hall of Fame player. And Bill Simmons did a wonderful piece about how he's actually a number to a lot of fans now. Those years don't matter. He's 9'3", and are the Lakers going to use the stretch provision? And will he be playing after this summer? So, and we have a nice video accompanying it. Steve gave us incredible access. It's pretty heartwarming and kind of sad. I haven't seen an athlete talk about their sports mortality as much as Steve had. So you really see the emphasis on the business has really impacted fandom and how people root for people and how they care about pickups. And Hall of Fame guy, and he's a number in some ways.
Do you think it adds or takes away from fan interest? Obviously, they're interested in the business, but when they think about business issues, do you lose the purity, do you think?
I actually think it opens up the tent a little more. I mean, I think you'll always have the emotional fans, but I actually intellectually and people who are interested in the business, it's like the movie business. I still love the movies and going to the movies and getting on the ride and having the creative experience. But, box office, who's signed for what, I think it adds a little bit. It's just an added dimension.
When it comes to fans, the notion of fan engagement, how do you measure that? How do you enhance it?
It's something actually we've been looking into a lot most recently. We're actually next week releasing a study in partnership with Navigate Research around social media engagement and the impact that has not only on fan behavior, but fan engagement and how they are acting on it, but what that value is to that piece of the puzzle. And we work with a lot of brands and a lot of properties, and we know the issues that they're facing, and that's certainly one of them, and trying to understand what the real impact of that is. And what we found is that while TV is certainly still the main place where fans will go to get their content and get into that marketing journey, if you will, from an awareness standpoint, especially if you're thinking at it from a sponsor perspective, the effectiveness of the social media channel, if you become aware of a partner brand through that channel, as you go down that funnel a little bit in your ability to become higher, positive feeling about a brand, or the ability to purchase and the intent of purchasing a brand starts to get elevated. So what it's doing for us is it's allowing us to think about, for brands and for properties, the application of that and how to think about the traditional pay for impression model a lot differently, and how you can actually turn that on its head a little bit and really start to look at the effectiveness of the medium and bring that to light for our partners and our brands.
Yeah, it's interesting. At ESPN, we look at it a lot too, and you read a lot in the media about people are multitasking while they watch TV, and is it really hurting fan engagement? And the data's hard our tools are not perfect yet, but we're all working on trying to sharpen them. But what we've found is it could actually help engagement, particularly with sports. I think sports has an advantage. Sports fans are incredibly engaged, especially during live events. They're incredibly tech savvy, so they use technology to connect with each other as well as to learn more about what they're watching. And we found folks, I think 30% of tablet usage is actually while people are watching TV. And we're pretty convinced that with sports at least, it's probably related content. And hopefully driving even more engagement. And that, obviously on the funnel and the business side, is a huge advantage over some other content areas.
Absolutely. And actually, it's funny because that pretty much mirrors one of the stats that we looked at was 30% are engaging with some sort of social media while they're watching the event. It's higher if you're actually there live. But it's not taking away. It's actually enhancing their enjoyment of that brand. And then when you take that a step further, we're seeing over 50% of people that are engaging with social media and sports are actually taking action. Now that action can be going to watch an event, it could be going to purchase something, it could be going to share and repost, but it's really demonstrating the opportunity if you think about how to put that in play.
And we've seen a crazy number, you've probably seen it too. I think 50% of all the TV-related tweets are actually about sports.
Yeah.
When sports makes up, low single digits of the content.
That's
so
exactly
sports
right.
Fans are all over social media while they're watching events.
And we're trying to get to that level of granularity where they're engaging with the team, they're tweeting, they're posting. Sometimes we'll look at just the raw numbers, and that can be misleading. I think the next generation, perfect for this conference, is what's the right analytical tool? Everyone's going to look at what are our likes relative to the number of Twitter followers, and I think that's a good start, and you need to have that base, but what are they really doing with your brand? What are they doing with the team is more important, and the tools are starting to be developed, but I don't know if we have the right tools yet in terms of measuring it.
Do you have any idea what they would be?
We're focused mainly on the engagement. So it is when people are doing something first on social media, and then, as was said earlier, then they're actually acting upon and doing something with us. Now, one of the things we're going to try and launch over the next year or two, a number of clubs have done it, is using our digital ticketing platform to track all of the things that fans are doing. Initially, it'll be brick and mortar. What are they doing at the stadium? But we'd love to track what are they doing on social media. Are they watching the games? And then you recognize it, reward in a lot of different ways.
Well, we always hear about the stadium experience, needing to enhance it, especially as the broadcasts get better and better and people have less incentive to go out and spend the money. So what does the future hold for enhancing the fan experience at the stadium?
Yeah, I think, we're obviously competing with 60-inch high-def television, so what is it about being at the game itself that's different than being at home? And it's the communal part of the experience. It's, I think the notion of stadium development, first of all, I think, sort of 3 seating bowls and then a bunch of 20-person suites. We need to develop new seating products. We need to develop products where if someone's tailgating out in the parking lot, which, by the way, is another opportunity to create a whole festival out in the parking lot every game where there's a premium tailgate area where we'll set up DirecTV for you, we'll set up everything out there, bring steaks, the grill. There's a general tailgate area, there's a family tailgate area with jumpy houses and everything, so that the experience end-to-end, the ingress, the egress, the purchase experience, we'll put a general store in the parking lot where we sell ice and umbrellas and beer and all those things. And then where you can take your 12 people you went to the game with, and instead of going into the game and dispersing into your own seats, maybe there's a seating product where you have your own 12, 15-person area in the actual seating bowl, so you can continue that communal experience to be at the game. Because I think people like to come to the games to be able to say they were there when something special happens, but also to be with a group of people that you can't be with if you're sitting on your couch at home necessarily. And we need to find a way to enhance every end-to-end. Concessions, I think, is a huge opportunity for improvement. The business model of concessions in sports is fundamentally broken, right? So the concessionaire takes a bunch of gross revenue off the top. They're incented for gross margins, so they're trying to raise prices and lower costs. You end up with 20-minute lines and $10 beers. How we fix that, create better opportunities, and a lot of teams are doing that now, where you can go to the stadiums and ballparks around the country and get great food at reasonable prices. For those types of, every end-to-end piece of the experience has to get better.
But what about the technology at stadiums?
That's a big part of it. I mean, if everything's going to digital, which it is, you can now walk in the stadium and it'll ping you and say you just got upgraded into new seats. It'll ping you and say you just got a discount over. We have now through Qualcomm and Beacon Technology, we're testing at Sun Life Stadium where you may be standing in line to get a beer and something will pop up and tell you the line's shorter 2 sections down. Why don't you try down there? So that technology will really continue to advance and continue to provide people with that kind of information and make their experience that much better.
I think with technology, whether it's Wi-Fi, devices, I think you have to equalize as best you can in terms of information that you get at the stadium. So, I was at a Super Bowl a few years ago. They've changed this. There was a great replay that happened, and literally we were emailing or texting people who were watching the game because we were in the stands saying, "What just happened? What does it show on the replay?" And they ended up putting it up. So I think between the scoreboard with replays, whether it's things with people's devices, I think you have to equalize to make sure if somebody wants to follow fantasy during the game, they should. Enhancing the game experience, I think Tom touched upon this. A lot of it is non-technology. It's taking away the pain points. So it's how can I get in and out of the stadium better? How can I go to the bathroom without waiting on lines and food? What we found, it's a lot of the simpler things. It's giving people stuff for their kids to do. So it is entertaining them in the plaza. So I think fans, they do want to watch the game, they enjoy the game, they want to have an ability to be part of a spectacle, and they have to do things that are different than what they can do at home, and that's what we're focusing on, technology and non-technology.
Actually, I think that's really interesting because the company called Bypass Lane has been brought up a number of times throughout the weekend, and we work with them as well. And what's interesting, I think it's feeding a lot of that information, and the most interesting piece about Bypass Lane, for those who aren't familiar with it, it allows you to have those communications and everything that Tom and Neil were talking about, but it's the back end data that is so rich that can really start to aid in that trend of discovery and personalization of the information that, to your point, Neil, I think is how do we actually put that now in play, and the need for partnerships all the way through the journey to be able to bring that to life, I think is where the opportunity really exists. Otherwise, fans are going to just get inundated from so many different places. But if there's a way for the teams and the brands and the technology to all work together, that's where I think a common theme that's been brought up this weekend.
It's interesting because everyone's focusing on improving the Wi-Fi and getting more data and things like that. When I'm at a game, the saddest thing to me is all the hunched over people. It's almost like you'd be better off cutting their Wi-Fi.
Yeah,
But you'd have some unhappy fans.
at our stadium, one of the big hits this year, MetLife set up a snow globe where people can go inside of it and take a picture of their kids inside kind of a mock snow globe. So it is those other things. Again, at home they can look down. We need them to look up. Now, it could be technology. You can take care of it with the scoreboard and music. Those are things that you really can't get at home to the same degree. But it's also some of the simpler things where you're giving people a chance to connect with, whether it's a family member or friends, and that's why they're going out to the stadium. If it's just to watch the game, they can do that in a lot of other places for less money.
I think Wi-Fi, too, a couple years ago was an amenity. It was a nice thing to have at a stadium. I think today it's like electricity. Fans expect it. If the lights go off, they're not going to be very happy. If the Wi-Fi goes off, they're not very happy. So it's no longer an amenity to invest in. It's now a necessity to have for people that they expect. And I think as the digital platform continues to grow and we continue to collect more data on our fans and activities and push more information to them, it'll just become that much more important as we move forward.
And fan expectations, you have to respond to it. And think of other businesses where 80,000 people are expecting simultaneously, if they wanted to get onto Wi-Fi. And in the NFL and in professional sports, we're being asked to deliver that, and we're going to have to deliver that. Otherwise, they're going to go somewhere else.
When you're at the game and you say, hey, you're trying to text your friend, meet me over at this club at halftime, and you can't get your text to go through,
Right.
that's a bad fan experience.
So as much as they are focused on the fan experience, you want people watching television and using all their devices. What are you finding, whether it's through analytics or some sort of measurement, how are devices being used?
Well, we know that people are multitasking. We've got numbers, I think, well over 80% of mobile and tablet users are using them while they're watching television. We don't see all these devices as a threat. We actually think it's an opportunity.
Are they looking at stats?
Well, we found. I'll give you this for the NFL guys. We found, we pride ourselves on game around the game. It's whether we carry the game or not, we are going to cover the game, hopefully better than anybody else. And on Sunday afternoons in the fall, we don't have NFL full games on our air, but our digital traffic at about 1 o'clock skyrockets to about 2 million active users a minute. And those are, we believe, football fans reading more about the games they're watching, the other games going on. So we just see it as a huge opportunity to serve the game around the game. We did a fun thing of the BCS this year. I don't know if you guys heard of the MegaCast, where you could watch the BCS championship game on ESPN1, the traditional broadcast. On 2, you could watch it with some celebrities and talent. You could watch it on another channel in a coaching room and have the coaches call and evaluate the plays. And the most fun I had was you could choose to watch the game with the local Auburn radio call or the FSU radio call, which was the most fun. So we see it's literally, this is just aggregating more audience, getting more people in, and we're excited about it.
But also brings up the notion of personalization. Mm-hmm. Well, actually, John mentioned personalization. Yeah. How do you customize this for fans, for the users? How much is that ahead in the future as well?
We are absolutely, personalization is a huge focus for us. We're trying to get more and more users to be in a logged in state when they're on our digital platforms because you'll have a better experience. But we also, with all these platforms, we let users customize their experience too. The MegaCast example, we just announced a few days ago, we're going to have 15 individual dedicated channels on our ESPN Watch product to each conference. So if you're a Mountain West fan or something like that, you will have your own channel on our platform. So some of this will be data and we'll personalize it for you, but some of it is just giving fans more choice, more access, and letting them choose.
And I think just coming at it from the brand perspective as how they think about integrating with sports and how to personalize for them, probably no surprise, I think the credit card companies and the mobile companies, the wireless companies certainly have a great advantage because of the data that they've got. And they really have the opportunity to connect with their target consumers in ways, whether it's the credit card company understanding as you opt in to certain things, you can actually be connecting to the credit card companies and they can understand the behavior that they've got so they can start to tailor things better for you that actually or start to learn from other platforms like the Netflix, if you will, or the Amazon. And same with wireless. I think Verizon Precision Insights was here last year and they talked about how they're doing a similar thing and taking data from the way you're pinging off your phone. Again, having to opt in and aggregating that information, but it's certainly rich and powerful, which I think is around the corner.
This is really, I think, a critical issue or opportunity. When I got out of college and started my first job, if I talked to 20-somethings that I work with.
This is why you're tending bar, right?
Yeah, this is when I was tending bar.
Were they sober?
Just after, yeah, 23 years ago. I tell 20-somethings I work with now, there was no email at work. There were no cell phones at work. There was no internet at work. And they look at me like, how old are you? And
But I take it a step further. I talk to kids and they're, well, what was it like when you were in high school? ESPN didn't exist. ESPN didn't exist.
Right.
How did you even live?
Right. And
How did you live?
Yeah.
Well, I guess I've done okay, right?
Yeah. I tell them I'm 44. So, but I think what that means today for these kids today is that this is a generation of the most entitled, demanding consumers in history. They have all the information at their fingertips. They want what they want, when they want it, how they want it now. And the traditional notion of how to develop a product and take it to market and basically convince people that they need what you're selling them, I'm not so sure that works anymore. And so it is about customization. It is about the decommoditization of products, services, and experiences, and how we figure out ways to do that for people, because we need to ask them what they want and then deliver that and customize it. And I think that's a trend you're going to see more and more of.
Yeah, I think if they want it, we should supply it. We certainly want people to come out to the stadiums, but what's happening with television and social media and non-traditional media is what we want. That's how they want to consume it. Then we should provide it for them, and that's our goal.
And it's also an opportunity for a lot of the people in this room. I think for most companies, the smartest thing you could do is hire some people who are not necessarily TV first people, who are used to this getting what they want when they want it, and empower them and let them have some input on products. I think any company that's not doing that, especially in the media business, is not doing the right thing.
Well, you mentioned earlier the business of sports. It just has changed a little bit for this audience. Just the premium on people who are innovative from a product development standpoint, analytically. I met a number of people here who said, oh, I'm doing some work with the Sixers, I'm doing work with this team, I'm with the Dolphins, that 5 years ago, people didn't, again, first it was the capologists, now it really is these technologically savvy people, analytically rigorous places, and the careers can be interesting, so people don't necessarily want to be at consulting firms or investment banks anymore, and now there's a place in sports, the dollars have gotten big enough that there's a willingness to put a premium on that, and that is a change over the last 10 years. Absolutely. When I first started the NFL, since we're giving anecdotes, I started the NFL in 1991. I was the first person to have a PC in that organization. Everyone was working off a DEC mainframe, so it's not that long ago. So we're dating ourselves, but and now you look at the level of sophistication from the league office to even minor league teams. It's just incredible.
I don't know if every generation feels this way with technology. I'm hard-pressed to think that they do, but technology now with the internet, and it speeds up so much. It's changing so rapidly. And how do you deal with that constant change?
Well, I remember the first time I ever saw an iPod and was able to listen to 2,000 songs and just sit there and listen to whatever song I wanted at that moment. And it was in 2003. The The iPhone was in 2007, and the iPad is now, I think, 4 years old. So the growth of technology in the last 10 to 20 years is, arguably more than the last 100 or 200 years before it. So again, what does that mean for the next 10 or 20 years?
Right.
It means, we really have to keep our eyes open and our ears open, and constantly, back to what my dad told me, always be learning and growing and getting better. We need to always be seeking opportunities to get better and what the next technologies are and trying to stay ahead of it.
But do you hear from fans as to what they want? Or I should say, what else they want? Whether it's the fan experience, whether it's branding, sponsor, whatever it is. What else they want to see, hear, or read on the various ESPN platforms?
Largely what we do is we see, especially on non-TV platforms. TV we have ratings, but on our other platforms we know exactly what they want. And sometimes they'll surprise you. When we launched Grantland, we knew it would appeal to a traditional Bill Simmons audience, a young audience. The kids, you think, no one thought they would read long form except maybe some of Bill's stuff. The engagement we have on Grantland is the highest we have across our digital properties. These young people are reading. They're reading 5,000 word columns by not just Bill.
Yes, long-form journalism is not dead.
We found it, the films group is in my group. And
It's in 23 tweets.
exactly, yeah. And we do long-form documentaries, and then we started doing these short films, 30 for 30 short films, and they're anywhere from 12 to 20 minutes. And people thought we were crazy because generally on the internet, they say every video has to be, under 2 minutes. And we have completion rates on, 12, 15-minute films online are getting 85% completion rates. If it's so that's the one thing. Things are moving really fast, but there's some fundamental tenets. Good content is good content. And you have to figure out when and where and how to serve it and all that. But I'd hesitate to react too much to some of these changes because sometimes fans will surprise you. And the good thing about the data is you can see what they're doing and respond to it.
Yeah, I think another core tenet of this is how you structure yourself and how you get at those insights from as an organization. I lead our insights and analytics group, which we think about as a horizontal that goes across all of our client teams and all of our different divisions that you may have heard from Casey yesterday. And what we've done also, and actually ahead of what we're doing on the insights front, is we have call it a digital team, but it's the same thing. It's embedded in every part of our business, so it's not just we'll go talk to the digital folks. They are embedded in every part of our business, and that's everything from thinking about key trends in the marketplace to talking to consumers and fans to talking to businesses and looking for new technological opportunities that can actually bring services to our clients and hopefully help unite our businesses a little bit better as well from an internal perspective. And I think that's a key part of changing the behavior of the organization to be able to get out ahead of those things.
I don't want to contradict myself. Analytics are critical. You need to do research. And Angie asked, how do you know what they want? Sometimes you don't know. I don't think we knew that people wanted an iPod. I don't think when television producers were thinking, do they need that 1st and 10 line? A lot of people, I already calculated in my head. So at some stage, you just got to take a chance. Research it, hopefully inform it, so you're making smart bets. But at some stage, you got to make a bet, and you're not going to know. And you'll see. And Tom's point on some of these seating products, I think he's right. But until you do it, you don't know if people are going to buy it.
Yeah, you can't forget the art. One of the things we're most proud of the last year is hiring Nate Silver. And, Nate's incredibly brilliant, has a great sports pedigree, he's known largely for politics, and people are kind of looking at us funny. Nate Silver at ESPN, he's brilliant. If any of you who know Nate, he's also a wonderful guy. He feels really passionately about his type of journalism and hiring a team and building a product with us. And, in the end, we ran the numbers, a business plan, we made the smart business deal, I hope. But that's a gut. We think that having a talent like that, and I've seen some of the stuff that'll be when we go live, we think it'll not just be a successful product, but it will infuse the rest of ESPN. We think it will infuse ABC News. We're really excited, but there's nothing on a piece of paper that could get us comfortable doing that. It really was a gut reaction. So there's some art to this that we have to remember too.
So for all the talk about, say, long-form journalism, the flip side, obviously, is the 140-character world, the Twitterverse. And we know all the benefits of it, and whether it's sponsors, brands, whatever, acts as a news feed for those in the media business. But what also causes for concern can there be with social media, with, say, Twitter, especially in this world where it's all about being first, but not necessarily about being right, unfortunately?
You want to take that one?
Why don't you start?
Why don't you start? Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I can comment. I mean, I think that what we find is that sports is a microcosm of life. It's something that inspires us. It's something that also educates us about ourselves. And Twitter, the use of Twitter, has changed how people take in information about sports, but also just about other things in life. And so, the 140 character sort of cynical, sensationalist, tweet out there.
Which somebody's going to do about what you're about to say,
Right.
so keep that in mind.
Yeah,
And they're
no,
funny,
I
they're
am.
snarky, they're very clever, but sometimes they're not right.
Yeah, yeah. It's oftentimes, we just need to remind ourselves to tell the stories about courage and humility and respect and teamwork and work ethic and love and redemption and overcoming obstacles, and a lot of the stories that you're telling at 30 for 30 and that you tell at Real Sports and you tell at all these stories that sports is inherent to what's wonderful about sort of humanity and the human spirit. We need to tell those stories too. And I think Twitter, the challenge with it from a news perspective is that there's not a lot of accountability for being wrong. There's just an anonymous source said this, and any piece of information, they go with it. And the notion of journalistic integrity and fact-checking and making sure something's right and the accountability for not doing that has shifted quite a bit in the last few years, partially because of Twitter, I think.
And yet, it's interesting. I was just recently reading that one NFL general manager was talking about how how they monitor the feeds of even the draft picks, and he saw things on there that he found could be troublesome. To what extent do you guys monitor any social media that anybody in your organization is involved with, players, executives, whoever?
We monitor it all. I think I think a lot of this started in more traditional companies where you hear if somebody had a bad experience and they started putting it on the internet, companies had to respond. It's that much more acute for a sports team. And these stories take on a life of their own. And as much as you want to say, look, we're going to just worry about our business and do what we want to do, every press conference will ask those questions. Our players, we think all players are focused on the task at hand, but it does ultimately infiltrate the locker room. So if there's misinformation out there, you really have to correct it quickly and you have to be proactive on it. And I think the journalists, I think they are working hard and they have a lot of integrity, but the pressure to get it out first. And I do think, this is my impression, they view Twitter a little bit different than their newspaper. So they know it. I just put it on. I only tweeted it. You'll go speak to somebody after and say, but that was wrong. But they're like, but it wasn't in the paper. But it does cause damage that we have to react to, whether it's fan perception or just noise in the building. It's just something you got to be prepared to address.
Well, in terms of damage control, look, there's plenty of issues in sports. There's the concussion issue. There's just the notion of civility. There's what you guys in Miami have dealt with the bullying issue, the culture of the locker room issue. How do things like this, I'm gonna save you to start. I'll make you start with this. I want to turn to you though. How do these types of issues that really transcend sports affect brands?
Yeah, I'd probably look at it in two ways. I think number one, we would look at it on behalf of our brands that we're advising as opportunity. I think if you think about the health and safety discussions, other player issues that are there, what are the opportunities for brands to be able to help the players, for brands to be able to help the partners that they've got to address those issues? So the obvious ones are in clients that we work with in the technology side, and what Microsoft and Verizon are doing with their technology to be able to bring software and hardware to the playing field and bring diagnosis and utilizing their network and bringing just real-time information to be able to help those brands. those teams react to those things. And I think that hopefully is something that the teams themselves in the league are encouraged by from brands to be able to continue to think like that and bring other opportunities. The other side of it, I'd say, would be from the player side and some of the issues that I think you're mentioning there. How we think about that we do a lot of advisory for our brands on whether or not they want to make brand ambassador partnerships, so athletes and otherwise. And so we actually go through a very rigorous process as we think about how to objectively recommend those opportunities on the front end. This is before the potential any issues are happening. To be able to give those brands a prioritized list that align not only to their objectives, they not only bring in the on-field performance to understand who's going to be connecting them with most by the way they're performing, but we go very deep into the off-field piece. So social media following, which can be an opportunity, but also looking at their history and looking at other things, and we bring that into a rigorous scorecard to be able to, on the front end, be able to recommend players that will hopefully be the right ambassadors for the brand. But then again, that's not perfect, and there are going to be things that will happen. And from there, we'll certainly work with our brands and the agents to put the right things in the contracts to be able to address those, whether it's from a brand fit perspective. And I think, Neil, the last thing I'll say, to your point, we'll also work, if there are issues that are happening, we'll work very quickly to understand the facts. We'll work in close relationship with the agents and really have the players' interests in mind, but ultimately our brands' interests are in mind, and so we'll have to put the right recommendations forward on how to adjust that and how to execute things in the contract if we have to.
So look, concussions are for all 32 teams, but what you guys have dealt with in Miami, it's now the Dolphins' name is now associated with this. How do you deal with that from a business standpoint?
Yeah, it's certainly a challenge. It's also an opportunity to lead. I think there's been plenty of other brands, if you want to use that term, that have gone through different types of crises and have come out of it better for it. So I think as it relates to the interesting thing about what happened and the initial part of what happened and talking about Twitter and those things is we were kind of learning about what was going on through the media as things were going on those first few days. And things were going back and forth and back and forth. And at one point, one ESPN reporter actually was on the radio and the interviewer asked, "Boy, we're confused. What is happening there? We've heard so many different stories about what's happened." And this reporter said, 5 years ago, it would have taken us 30 days to report on this story. But now, we have so much pressure to just tweet out any fact we hear, we have to tweet it out right away. And so trying to really step back and say, okay, let's just time out. We're not going to form any judgments until we actually have the facts and know what happened. And, that's a difficult thing to do. But then coming out of that, trying to make good decisions and use it as an opportunity to get better. And our owner is a big-hearted, really good person. And so he really took this to heart, took it very seriously, and is doing things and saying, how do we take this now to use ourselves as an example, and also for the rest of sports and society to say, how do we teach and educate and use this as an example? And I think positive things can come out of these situations.
Well, you've got a bill that is now being sponsored in front of the Florida State Legislature, which is basically an anti-bullying bill that would extend to all levels of sport, not just at the professional level, but even starting with high school sports, so something along those lines. Yeah,
and certainly a pledge that kids would take to treat each other respectfully, and it's a notion of civility in our society. I can walk down the street, and if someone screams profanities at me and doesn't like me, if someone ran up on stage right now and screamed profanities in my ear, I'm pretty sure security would remove them. They might even get arrested.
Hopefully.
But if I go on Twitter and somebody doesn't like me and doesn't know me and they scream that I should be fired and they scream all bad things about me and they profanity at me and they're going to come hurt my family and all these things, those things are just they're just out there, and there's no accountability for those things necessarily currently. And so society is shifting a little bit, and I do think there's an opportunity to have these discussions about civility and about what's appropriate and inappropriate behavior and appropriate and inappropriate language in different contexts. Certainly an 8th grade locker room is different than an NFL locker room. We have to understand that.
Not always.
But at the same time, there is behavior that's inappropriate in any setting, and we have to recognize that.
I'm curious, though, from your perspective, not just as the Jets president, but also from your experience in the league, when something does happen with one of the member clubs, how much does it reflect on all?
I think it's an issue that you have to deal with as a league. You have to deal with it as 32, and you have to be supportive of one another. And if something happens in Miami, you have to quickly understand that could happen. You know, if you don't heed the remedies that they're going to take, it could happen somewhere else. I think certainly, Steve Ross and crew have led and done a good example, and we just put a premium on leadership to do that. But it's something that does affect all of us. It's a reflection on all of us, but it's also a reminder that things can change very quickly, and you got to get ahead of these issues.
In terms of looking ahead to the future, I think 23 of the 32 NFL teams, now we're just talking NFL, are valued over $1 billion. And you actually have the Cowboys valued at over $2 billion. What are they doing right? What do we take from these teams that can be applied across the league, across various leagues, if you will, various businesses even potentially?
Well, I think a lot of it is good things we've done with our media partners, so we've talked about this. So we'll talk a little bit about the scarcity of the assets and why there's only 32 of them, and so they will get bid up and people will pay. But the business has evolved in a very constructive way. We've talked about all the ways that fans can interact. Well, there's an opportunity to monetize that. We built a $1.6 billion stadium. And as part of that, you added amenities that fans hopefully will pay for. So a lot of it is just a different level of investment than you had 20, 30 years ago in your facilities, in the media. And some of it is just as people have gotten busier, we've been a beneficiary of people just focusing on sports and at the expense of other diversions that they may have had. And so some of it has been careful planning. Some of it's just been in the right place at the right time. But it's also an elite group that people want to be part of, and it's an asset that keeps getting bid up. When I was at the league, I worked on a number of expansion processes, and we had some quiet conversations on what we thought these teams were going to go for, and they always exceeded it because there was somebody who had been successful in other endeavors who wanted to come in. So when expansion was done in the early 90s, teams were sold in the 150 to 200 million range. When Al Lerner bought the Cleveland Browns in the late 90s, it was $530 million. 3 years later, Bob McNair bought the Houston Texans for $700 million. So you just have people who want to be part of this enterprise. A lot of people here today, whether it's the NFL or other sports, and there just aren't that many opportunities to get in it. Somebody that's successful as Steve Ross, that asset's there, he wants to have it, and they're going to pay a premium for it.
Yeah.
I've got some questions here from the audience, and I want to try to, it looks to be some decent questions. I'd like to try to get to as many as possible. Just really quickly, sort of a little bit along these lines. What is one person wants to know, what's the economic value of finding a solution to reducing concussions, to the whole improving the health and safety for all parties, media, player representatives included? What's the economic value?
I wouldn't look at it from I would kind of switch the question. I don't think it's an economic issue. We all enjoy being part of professional sports, but there are people who if they are taking risks, they need to understand those risks, and we need to go out of our way to minimize those risks.
See, I viewed it a little bit, I'm with you actually, now that I've read the question, not so much economic value maybe, but again, it gets back to the brand. I mean, look, if youth football is going down because parents don't want their kids to play, that ultimately is affecting fans, it's affecting brands, it's affecting people who want to watch online or watch and certainly the number of fans you're going to have. So how do you manage that? How do you deal with those issues?
I think part of it's going back to what I talked about earlier. I mean, I think, I played high school football, and I would say it has as much to do with me being sort of who I am today of anything, in my childhood development outside my mom and dad. So
we've learned a lot about you today. I love this.
Yeah. So it's in all seriousness, I think it's making sure that we tell the positive stories too, and don't just become a society that harps on the challenges. I mean, we need to talk about the challenges because we need to address them objectively and fix them. But I think we also need to talk about all the great things that come along with it too.
All right, I kind of like this one. Are teams, no, excuse me, hold on, where is this one? Oh yeah. Are teams missing out on the best employees by being notoriously low-paying businesses?
No. I don't think we're notoriously low paying. I mean, I think maybe compared to some other industries, you know, if you're, I think that was one of the entitled, demanding new members of the generation I was talking about earlier. You know,
Really playing up for your
we
audience.
pay, yeah,
The entire audience knows it, yeah.
we pay entry-level jobs a lot more than I was making, I think, when I was bartending. So, no, I mean, there's an opportunity to make money in sports. There's all kinds of different avenues in sports, whether that's in investment banking or in as a lawyer or in sales or in, you know, all these different facets of sports, in content creation, and you know, you got to work hard and work your way up, and the money comes if you're passionate about what you do.
Yeah, I agree. I think at the entry level, it's competitive, but it's not overly lucrative. But I think there's an opportunity pretty quickly to make you know, meaningful income, and there's just a premium put on good people, and that's continuing to change.
If you turn down a job at a sports team because of the money, you're a mercenary. It's not necessarily your passion and why you want to be there.
Well, and I think
But you got to take you know, people are asking, you got to take an interesting job where you are developing, because there are, you know, people ask for advice all the time. They're all fun jobs in sports, but there's some jobs that are not going to help your career, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend you. I don't want to pick what those are.
Why? What are they?
Well, again, there could be things where you're working for a person who's not developing you. They're having you do mundane tasks, and you're not really growing. You're not developing. You're not getting exposure. You're not understanding the broader business issues. If you can do that for 3 months, fine. We can all do those jobs. We've all had those jobs, but that can't be 3 years. And for people who are in their 20s, you're going to be 30, 35 quickly. You got to make sure you've added a lot of different experiences.
And you can also you can also try to avoid the entry-level jobs. I mean, I think a lot of us on this panel did other things and would argue pretty vehemently that the skills we acquired and the experience we got ultimately let us get into sports at a higher level. So it's not necessarily about taking the first job you can get in sports. It's not always the right career decision.
I was going to say something along the same lines as that, and Neil said it earlier as well, the landscape's changing, and the skills that are being valued within our businesses, all of our businesses, are much different than they were. And I think that's a great point of being able to step outside of sports and understand what skills that you have that you can bring in to look at sports a lot differently. And I think that's actually how a lot of the businesses are growing, especially in our business. You know, we have a very diverse workforce where, you know, we have people that come from sports, but we have a woman that used to build bombs, and we have somebody that worked in brands and lawyers, and it adds to the really unique thinking, especially in our business from an advisory perspective, but I think in every business it just adds to the unique thinking and the curiosity that will drive the business forward.
And I hate to sound like the old person on the panel, but please don't forget about paying your dues. I mean, there is something for that. Isn't that also what
I
all
was
of
paying
us-
back loans, so I had to.
One more thing. I mean, I never took a job in my career because of geography, title, or money. It was always, where's the best opportunity to learn, and where's the best opportunity to produce results? And along with that comes, you know, you got to work with great people in a great environment. But if you're learning and producing results, opportunities are going to present themselves, and you're going to be able to guide your career wherever you want, and you're going to end up making money. If you take a job just because of money, that's one value structure, but that's not necessarily a recipe for career growth, in my view.
A question for my left-sided NFL folks here. How do you feel about taking money from the public when financing stadiums? I guess the person who just chuckled is the one who had that question. There you go.
I spent 15 years working on stadium financing at the league.
Right.
And really, our mantra is there is no one size fits all. So it really is a community decision. The mayor of Nashville, we used to kind of get some of these testimonials, and he said, look, I'm not a sports fan. I like to go to libraries and other cultural institutions that the government pays for, but the people in my community like to go to football games. And a quarter of our newspaper is dedicated to this. So every community has to prioritize what is in their best interest and what's the right level of contribution. Clearly, there's economic returns being generated by owners and teams by playing in these stadiums, but there's also benefits to having that team there, whether it's economic impact or just something that's great to have in your community. So I wouldn't say that it has to be 100 or 0 one way or the other, but and each community can draw the line, but I think clearly both sides benefit from the right stadium deal.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it depends on the market and the community, but a lot of these situations, I mean, these dollars create tremendous economic impact. So if it's an expense or a subsidization, it's one thing. If it's an investment into economic development and economic growth, that's another thing. And Super Bowls bring tremendous economic value. BCS championships bring tremendous economic value. 81 baseball games in a downtown area in Denver or San Diego or these places created tremendous economic value to those downtown areas. So it depends on the situation, it depends on the market, it depends on the needs and priority of that community, as Neil said. But I think when it's investment, it makes sense.
One person had a question specifically for you, Tom, regarding when you talked about the socialist nature of sports. They want to know, do you think it stifles innovation and creativity to the detriment of all parties? For example, concessions? And do teams and rights owners have a willingness to work with startups to catch some upside?
Well, on the first point, no. I think the socialism part of it's more about competitive parity. So it's more about creating an opportunity for, the Green Bay Packers to beat the New York Giants, and to be judged on how these teams operate and run themselves and do those things. There's still an opportunity to innovate other parts of the business, and you mentioned the Dallas Cowboys earlier. They've innovated tremendously on the business side and benefited as a result. So there is opportunities to innovate. What was the second question?
The second question, do teams and rights owners have a willingness to work with startups to catch some upside?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, our owner definitely has started, Steve Ross started a company called RC Ventures. It's run by Matt Higgins. They've invested in a PR firm and an event firm, in a sponsorship firm, and they've created an International Champions Cup soccer league that essentially now is very influential over international soccer in the United States. So there's a lot of investment into startups in sports.
Just on the socialism one, clearly there's revenue sharing that allows people to compete on the field, as Tom said. But if it was purely socialistic, it would not be the right model. The fact that we have an incentive to grow revenue, that Tom has an incentive to grow revenue, leads to a lot of innovation, it leads to investment, it leads to risk-taking, and leads to a better answer, both financially and for the fan. In terms of the question on the league formed an investment fund, something I worked on when I was there, so that's already starting at the league level, and then clubs, whether it's what they're doing with related sports and entertainment. We have a new business function. We're always looking to what's the next thing, whether it's right in our sweet spot or something that's not quite on center. It's something we need to look at.
And by the way, I said a degree of socialism is imperative.
Right.
Not that it should be a socialist environment.
But I'm sure somebody tweeted it.
Yeah, I'm sure they did.
But this is our last question, which is, it's interesting because it'll bring us full circle to where we actually started from. Someone would like to know, to all the panelists, what is the cultural difference between your current job, say for you at Wasserman, your former jobs at Nike and BCG, for you at Miller, for Marie and Neil on Wall Street? What are the cultural differences between now and what you had previously?
Sure.
Sure.
So I guess the biggest contrast for me at Wasserman is working for I'd say relatively smaller company compared to the other two. So Wasserman is a privately held company. We're global. We're about 350 people worldwide versus the Boston Consulting Group and Nike. I think the similarities are, that the curiosity and the passion and the kind of the collegial culture of all those organizations are very much present at Wasserman. I think for me though at Wasserman, the notion of, and Casey describes this as, we want to be the best, not the biggest, and what that translates to is we can always go and get more revenue, but Casey cannot get another name on his door. And I think that notion actually is the way we think about our business and the way we hire people, the clients that we work with, and how we grow our business. And I think that culture of curiosity and integrity. It was present in all of my other places, but I think it's amplified in the organization that I'm in today.
For me, Wall Street was incredibly transaction-oriented. You do a deal and move on. ESPN, we're in it for the long haul. It's a 35-year-old company. A deal or something I work on today, I have to live with for the rest of my career, probably. And the good news about that is ESPN as a company feels that way too. I mean, we make a mistake, we're living with it. We value our relationship with fans above everything else, and so when we screw things up, it's a bad day for us, and it's a very long-term focus, so much different than Wall Street, but at least my role in Wall Street, which was very deal and short-term focused.
So they're the cultural difference. I want to hear the cultural difference between working at a bar and working at no, only kidding. So Miller to the Dolphins.
Yeah, I'm developing quite a reputation as a bartender today.
A show coming up.
Hey, it's a skill, man.
Mixology.
I worked for Miller Brewing Company in Texaco, both early in my career, and I think working for big companies versus working for a sports team. Culturally, I love the fact that at a sports team, you're not so small that you're a startup, that you're trying to survive every day, but you're small enough that you can know everybody's name. So I can know everybody's name in the organization. I can, walk through the stadium on game day and know people's name. And you can create a culture and a vision of excitement and galvanize around that when you can actually know everybody that works there, and that's a lot of fun.
I think at the Jets, even though it's a big footprint in terms of the impact that the Jets or other teams have, it is a small organization. We're 150, 160 people. I would say the biggest difference, at least for me, is you all work on business problems and you're trying to think through consumer issues or customer issues. At a sports team, you deal with the customer. You deal with the fan. So we had a training camp. After training camp broke, we had a fan day at our facility, and I'm just walking through, and there's some woman sitting there, and I said, "How's your day going?" Awful. It was too hot. She had a lot of kind of concerns about her fan experience that day, and you can't just walk away from that. And so we certainly accommodated her that day. I took her card. We had her come down on the sideline for a game to enjoy it. She texted me when she was on the sideline. This was a great experience. So you really are just that much closer, and you have to respond to the fans and understand who your consumers are. You know it intellectually in a lot of jobs, but in this job, you're going to hear it firsthand. And whether we talked about social media, but even it's the face-to-face, they're going to know who you are, and they're going to give you their feedback. And you have to be empathetic. You can't ignore that, because it will ultimately turn against you if you do.
Well, thanks to those who have provided questions, but really a huge thank you for the tremendous insights and thoughts from our panelists. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.